Everyone, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today we're not going to make a giant lure like that. We're going to make a swim bait. Actually, specifically, we're going to make an engineered angler version of the Magic Swimmer. Now this is a lure made by Swimbait. It comes in a few different sizes. It's a swim bait. It's pretty quick to sink. This is a pretty decent lure. I've owned a few of them. The only negative thing I have to say is that the finish is pretty wimpy. It flakes and chips real easy. The other thing that I'm not super happy with is that it takes a little bit of a pretty fast pace to get this thing to actually swim. If you retrieve it nice and slow, like I often like to do, it actually won't swim. It'll just sort of trail. Since I've already explained that I'm not super happy with the way this thing swims, I'm going to modify it. It's going to be an engineered angler's version, but I want this lure not to sink very quickly and to swim at a slower speed. So that means shortening that first segment on the head, thickening it a little bit, and making a more radical sweep in the belly. Because what makes a lure like this actually swim is turbulence, and you want to develop turbulence early so that the two tail sections actually begin to move, and that means being able to get that turbulence at a slower speed. All right, let's get going. So if you've got a lure that's a real favorite and you want to make a copy of it, it's not that difficult. You can put it in a copier, print it out the same exact size, or you can bump it up a size the way I am. It's just up 30%, making it 5 inches long. And then by using a little bit of multi-purpose contact spray glue, you can quickly transfer it to the piece of wood you want to cut it out from, and then you just trim off the excess. And now you can take this thing to your saw and start cutting. But since I've already committed to doing it slightly different, I've gone ahead and drawn my version on the other side. If you're not big on drawing your own, you can always use this method. All right, before we actually cut it out, let me give you some general dimensions. So the only thing I'm going to note is that the shape of the body, the cross section right here, is just going to be slightly fatter at the top, but not very much. It should be pretty much an oval. Alright, so before I get too far along shaping this thing, there's one thing that needs to be addressed as far as the shape itself. And that's the contour of the shape looking down on it, the plan view of it. The original is real simple. It's very narrow at the nose, and its widest point is right about center. And that's really not the best setup. Remember, we've got to get turbulence going, and if you have your wide point way back, it allows the flow around the lure body to stay laminar, stuck to the body, and that's why you really got to take that thing a little faster than normal to get it to swim. So what I want to do is have the wide point at about the 25% to 30% mark on the length of the body from the head. Alright, so before I get too far along on this thing, I need to consider how I'm going to cut these joints. As much as I dislike V-cut joints, for this lure, I think it's appropriate. I don't need it to have a lot of movement, I just need to have enough where it'll force the lure to turn when I twitch it, and it'll still have a decent swimming action. So, now to cut it.
Here I'm drawing some guidelines for the hinge cuts. I'm using a piece of paper that I cut on a 45. These lines will guide my cut. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap these lines all the way around the lure, so I have guidelines everywhere. And I'll use a straight edge to connect the points. This should help me get an accurate cut.
right, not too bad. Definitely going to need to refine it a little bit after I cut it. But right now, we need to shape this thing into the proper shape of a lure. So as I'm shaping it, I'm eyeballing this shape. You can see I drew a center line on the bottom, and of course I had my center line on the top. But the next thing I'm going to do is narrow down the top and get that shaped. You can see there's some pretty nice symmetry, little bit of refining with some hand sanding, but otherwise it's looking pretty sharp, pretty much the way I envisioned it. And let's talk a little bit about the design changes that I've made. You can see that I've moved the first joint cut way forward, so the front segment is much shorter. Also, you can see the scoop out right here at the belly is much more aggressive. And I made those changes so I can get turbulent flow to develop earlier in the lure. In other words, farther forward, so I can get, I hope, a little more aggressive swim motion at slower speeds. And I'm making one more critical change, and that's to move the tie-on eye farther up the face. So now to figure out the weighting on this thing, how much weight I need to put in it. So I've already taken a little section of the block of wood that I used, and I measured it, did the calculation for volume, and then weighed it and did the calculation for density. And the density of this wood is 0.686 grams per cubic centimeters, and the weight of it is 18.55 grams. So if I take and divide that by the density of the wood, I get 27.04 centimeters cubed. That's the volume of the lure. So what that means is that this lure will displace 27.04 cubic centimeters of water. So to get it to be neutral, it has to weigh exactly 27.04 grams. And I know just from experience that theoretical number, in this case 27.04, typically needs an extra 10% for it just to begin to sink. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take 27, we'll just round it to 27, and increase it by 10%, and that'll give me 29.7 grams. I have a total allowance of 11.5 grams that I can put in it, including hardware, hooks, split rings, the eyes, any foil I put on it, the paint I put on it, and even the clear coat. I've got these cut to size, and I like to make sure I get at least an inch, inch and a quarter embedment on a lure this size. All right, pretty happy with that. We're ready to move on to the next stage. All right, brand new day. We're gonna get back at it. Man, it's foggy out there. Okay, I've got the lure in the vise. I'm gonna glue in the twist eyes, and I'm gonna show you a quick trick. I like to mix my 2-part epoxy in a little tiny Ziploc, and you just kind of squeeze in what you think you're gonna need. Then you just seal it and then start kneading. And then I snip the little corner off just enough so you can see it bead. So the best way I've found to get this stuff down in there is to spin the twist eye, and that twist acts like a little conveyor belt, little helical pump. And I think I've got that full now, and I can shove it in there and then wipe off the excess. And we move on to the next one. All right, that does it. I've got all 3 glued in, just need to wait for them to set and we'll start carving. Alright, so we need to finish up our calculations for how much weight to put in it. So I'm going to shoot for very slow sinking, which will probably mean that in salt water it'll tend to be floating. Alright, so the body with the hook eyes is at 19.21. The 2 hooks with the split rings, the 3 hinge eyes, and the 2 hinge pins comes out to 25.72. I really want it somewhere around 30 grams, so let's see what that split shot does for us. 28. And one more, 30.27, that's right on the money. Let's go with that. And I'm gonna put one of them just in front of the hook eye and one just back here in the beginning of this segment because I just don't have room. All right, and I'm just gonna fill this with epoxy, the UV resin. And I like to get it to beat up just a little bit and then I'll sand it flush. Alright, I'll get back to you when we're ready for the next step. Alright, so I've got most of the sanding done and I've also marked where I'm going to put the hinge loops or the hinge eyes and where I'm going to put the slots for them. I'm going to start by cutting out the slots with the Dremel tool. Alright, so I've got the slots done on both the center section and the tail, and I've drilled the pilot holes so I can screw in the eyes. Screwed in this eye, and I'm just ready to sort of dry fit this thing. That looks pretty good. Now I need to drill a hole for the hinge pin on the center section. And now I can just dry fit this thing, and there it is. Not bad. These V-joints don't give a lot of range of motion, but it's enough for this thing. I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of coats of polyacrylic just to seal the wood and act as a primer, and then I'm going to give it a clear coat, and that will be a sealer for these inside surfaces that won't likely get much of a clear coat at the very end. So I'll get back to you when the clear coat's set. I think I've got it pretty well sealed. The only place you can get water is maybe on the little holes for the pins. I'm anxious to see how that calculation worked out. Let's go ahead and put it in the tank. Nice moderate sinking. All right, so what my plan is to paint this thing a pilchard color, like a green top. I want to have a little bit of gold in there, some silver, and transparent green on the top, maybe a little black. As usual, it'll be a little bit of music and maybe some voiceover. It's been a while. Let's get it out. Spoiler alert, I painted some dots on it just to give it a more of a natural bunker look. I was just looking at it and I thought, you know, it looks a little too plain. That's gonna look pretty cool. Let me go ahead and assemble it and we'll hook the boat up and get over to the lake and see what it does in the water. All right, we made it. Let me show you what the lure looks like. I think it looks a lot like a real bunker. Before I put it in the water, let me just say, if you're enjoying these videos, give me a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm and helps build the channel. If you like this kind of build, let me know. Put something in the comment. And if you got any other lures you'd like to see improved, let me know. All right, let's put this thing in the water. Now, I always use either a clip or a loop knot with a swim bait. Let's see how it does. Well, you can see the water is pretty murky. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Let's see how it sinks. Pretty nice. All right, now let's see if it swims slow like I predicted. Look at that. I'm gonna bring it back, and when I stop and give it a little twitch, it turns almost all the way around. Look at that. All right, let's run to the other end of the lake and see if I can find some cleaner water. All right, I came a couple of miles all the way to the west end of the lake, and it doesn't look like it's any better. Well, maybe a little better. I'm loving this thing. Let's see. Let's push the limit. See if it'll swim very fast at all. Oh yeah. No problem at all. I nailed it. So nice when your instincts work. That is awesome. Shoot, man. We need to do some underwater shots. But first, let me give it a little shot over here. Really happy with the way this thing is running. Much better than the original Magic Swimmer. I think this thing is really going to terrorize the fish at the Gulf of Mexico. And who knows, maybe I'll catch a bass tonight. The sun's going down, but I'm going to do a little fishing. And if I catch anything, I'll put it at the end of this video. Thanks for watching.
I love the cast on this thing. And what I love about it too is that you can just sit here and count it down. And even in super shallow water, you got plenty of time to let it just sort of soak. That's a big bass. I don't think I'll be able to revive this guy. He's missing parts.